Hello, and welcome to the Revenge of the Drive-In commentary track for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This is unusual in that it is not on our list, but I still feel that... So we'll never do it for the podcast, but, you know, we're both fans of it, so we want to talk about it. I'm sure I have more stuff to say about why it was chosen, but...
Well, you know, this is also kind of...
We've got plenty of time.
Oh, we do, yeah. We have almost 3 hours worth of time. But, you know, I was going to ask you, what's your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? Because this one's mine.
Yeah, this one as well. For me, I don't think it's that close between this and Return of the King. Definitely the distant third is Two Towers.
Yeah, I feel like if you like the Two Towers, I know everything about you immediately if you tell me that.
I feel like in hindsight, the Helm's Deep sequence gets more credit than it deserves, considering most of the movie is trees walking around, you know? There's a lot of boring
there's
stuff
Isengard, which is pretty cool.
It's still a good movie, but the second one, they filmed these movies all at the same time, so I can't say that this actually went into the filmmaking necessarily, but like I feel like the first movie realizes the hobbits are the heart of the story. The second movie lost track of that. And then the third movie, they realized it again. So that's the big part of the reason why Two Towers is by far the worst.
Well, and it's also funny.
It's still a fine movie, but it's just not as good as this.
Well, you know what the first scene I think all the hobbits shot together was? Or
was
even
it
the
like
first
something
scene
from the end or something?
Yeah, it was at the Grey Havens, when Frodo leaves with Bilbo and Gandalf. And I think that was the first scene everybody shot. That's
interesting. Well, they probably didn't want to... They probably figured, you know, Ian Holm might die before we can finish putting this makeup on him. So because he's got a ton of old age makeup in that scene. So
he does, yeah. It's gonna.
So we'll get this scene out of the way. If we have to recast him, we will. But you know, I think for the most part, the extended editions are great if you're just a Lord of the Rings fan and you just get more of what you love. It's if I were just, you know, to a casual person, like, hey, do you want to check out The Lord of the Rings? I would not introduce them to the extended editions. Those are deeper cuts. You got to watch the original first. But I was also thinking, because I saw the extended edition of this relatively recently, and then I watched the theatrical versions of Two Towers and Return of the King not too long after that. And I'm going to say... First of all, as good as the extended editions are, and as fun, as enjoyable, as faithful to Tolkien's works as they are, they kind of did everything right in terms of trimming what they did from the extended edition into the theatrical version. Just about every cut they make is for the better.
So I agree. If I can jump in, I totally agree. I think everything that they cut... Well, like in The Fellowship, most of the things they cut are just like extra fluff scenes or comedic scenes.
Yeah, there's a few comedic moments. There's one, I will say there's a few scenes that play a bit better in the extended edition. I want to say when they first meet Galadriel, that scene's a bit more interesting when they're just like staring at her and she's communicating in Boromir's mind. I think that scene just plays better in the extended edition. I don't remember specifics as to why.
I think it's the same scene. I don't think anything was added there, but I could be wrong.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong then. But then,
as a fan of Lord of the Rings, I don't believe this is in the theatrical. I've had an argument with a friend for years about this. So I'm going to look out for it. But I believe it's only in the extended when they get into Moria. Somebody is asking Gandalf what they mined in Moria, and somebody holds a torch down, and this wall of mithril lights up, and it's the same shirt that Bilbo gave Frodo. And Gandalf says something like, "Oh, it wasn't in gold or gems that they made their riches; it was in mithril." I'm almost positive that's in the extended and not the theatrical. But like stuff like that was stuff that somebody who read the books would enjoy. You know, that like...
Yeah, that was going to be what I was going to say. I don't remember that moment specifically, but there is a lot of detail from the books in the extended editions that are 100% not necessary for telling the story in a visual medium. And for example, never in the theatrical version of the films is it mentioned that Aragorn is actually 700 years old, or several hundred years old,
70.
However old he is. Or is he 70? No, well, he's like but they talk about like what race he is, and he's like
from the Dunedain.
Yeah, the Dunedain, they go into detail in that in the extended editions, and that's a big part of the books, but it's 100% unnecessary for actually just telling this story.
Yeah,
that's deep lore stuff. You don't need it to just tell an A to B to C story.
Well, the thing is,
in Tolkien, an A to B and a back to A story, because that's obviously Tolkien's big thing, is the journey home.
And wanting to make a fantastic product and also showcase the country of New Zealand on screen.
I have something to say about that.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't like how New Zealand has kind of picked it up, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I think that's the difference between this and
it's like New Zealand's claim to fame now, which
I know, and it's like, but you have so many beautiful things, you know?
No, my great aunt, who I'm sure has never seen a minute of any of the Lord of the Rings movies, she went to New Zealand on a cruise at some point, and I guarantee she was like taken on a coach bus, and they were going by these places, and it's like, and here, this was the Weathertop scene in Lord of the Rings, and it's like, she doesn't know what any of that stuff is. She just wants to see the pretty country, and,
yeah,
and I'm sure
like,
she did, and she still enjoyed that. These movies, I should say, beautiful showcase for New Zealand and its incredibly diverse environment, you know, snowy mountains, you know, beautiful, you know, not tropical, but like certainly warm looking locations. Like you see it all here. Mm-hmm. There's a part of me, maybe it's a big part, maybe it's a small part, I'm not really sure. There's a part of me that is disappointed they didn't shoot these in Britain, because this is what Tolkien was thinking of Britain when he was thinking of Europe too, because World War I and everything, but Britain has incredible geography where you could have done, maybe you couldn't have gotten the snowy mountains and stuff, but you could have done most of what they do in these movies if you go up to like Cumbria and the Highlands.
You know what, Patrick,
and certain parts of Wales. I think you could have done that.
And definitely Scotland, you know. Like,
yeah, the Highlands.
I'm totally
mainly.
on board with that line of thinking, and I used to think that a lot, but I think the problem was, like, obviously, like, practicality. I'm sure it would have cost a lot more filming in Britain for whatever reason, but also...
Probably, but I mean, I don't know the details on that. I mean...
Well, also, I mean, but you had Peter Jackson, Fran
they were all from New Zealand.
Exactly, and then Kiwis. Also Weta was a New Zealand-based company, and it was making all the costumes and weaponry and stuff for the movie, But no, I think a big problem with filming in Britain or Europe is the people, and also...
It's the French. It's always the French.
It's always the French. But it's also like there's just too many people, too many towns. You'd have to CGI out towns, you know, whereas like a place like this is literally just a vast plain with a mountain
New
range.
Zealand's more remote. That's true.
Yeah. But then also on top of that...
That is true.
If you put the Matterhorn in your fucking movie, people will be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. That's the Matterhorn.
That's the Swiss Miss logo.
Yeah, but you put New Zealand in a movie, most people, I'm positive most people in the late 90s, early 2000s never really thought about New Zealand once. Occasionally they'd see it on a map and they'd be like, oh yeah, there's a country down there. But I'm sure they never really stopped to think what New Zealand
that's probably true. Like, if you're taking advantage of the Lake District in Britain, you've got hikers there you have to deal with. You've got a lot of hikers.
Get the fuck out of the shot or dress up in a Hobbit costume, dude.
Yeah. Listen, you could be a wizard or an orc, unless you want to work with our forced perspective team. Oh, you have a kid? Great, he can be a hobbit.
Yeah, great, he can be a stunt double. But yeah, I don't know. I think New Zealand.
Oh, your kid has a beard. Perfect. Well, just throw a dwarf costume on him.
Does he like John Rhys Davies by any chance? The movies and the books are synonymous with each other, right? You can't have the movies without the books, but you also...
But the movies have been so big that you can't talk about the books without like ignoring the movies.
Exactly,
right,
because the movies are bringing a lot of people into being interested in Lord of the Rings and the lore and everything that surrounds it. I think that's
perfectly fair, yes.
But all these fucking gatekeeper purist pieces of shit there's so many of them, and people will make like nice art, like really talented artists out there making like digital art, and it'll be like a beautiful shot of like Gandalf and Bilbo like smoking in the Shire, you know, and like it looks beautiful, it's done really well, but it'll be like them wearing like their movie costumes, and somebody will be like, I'm really upset when artists take it upon themselves to draw an inspiration from the movies and not their own imagination. Because I never pictured Gandalf and Bilbo looking like that, but now because of the movies, everybody pictures them looking like that. And it's like, how about you shut the fuck up?
First of all,
because you're a loser, dude.
Well, yes, but first of all, The name Bilbo, I don't know what it is, but it screams Ian Holm. Ian Holm's kind of chubby shape. Ian Holm is like perfect for Bilbo. Like he is exactly just hearing the name Bilbo, knowing nothing else about the character. Just he's a hobbit. You picture Ian Holm, right?
Yeah.
Don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's like perfect. I mean, I don't know specifically, if they ever really get into his visual descriptions much in the books. They may or may not. I'm not really sure. Tolkien has a tendency to go into extreme detail on certain things, but not necessarily the things that you would expect him to. Supposedly, the dwarves in The Hobbit were like very clearly supposed to be like Jews, especially in The Hobbit because they're like refugees and they don't have a home, and it's like how, Israel. But then he realized that like, because dwarves are in The Hobbit, they're greedy and
they're Jews, dude. I get it.
They're not without honor, but they're not the most likable people necessarily. No. And then the Holocaust comes, and then he's writing Lord of the Rings after World War II, and he toned that down. And Gimli is actually who's really the only dwarf heavily featured in Lord of the Rings, but he is not depicted as being greedy or anything like that. And I think that's because like Tolkien realized, oh wait, this kind of rhetoric is actually terrible. Like, you know what? But like, I'm just, I don't know.
You know what? Like, I think, yeah, I mean, it is terrible. But at the same time, you had people like at the time that Tolkien was writing The Hobbit, you had people like Agatha Christie writing, 10 little N-words, and then we can't
even say the title of some of her books.
No, exactly.
Yes. Are the Hobbit stoners? This has been talked about a lot. No, you strongly disagree.
Yeah, this is what pisses me off all
the
time.
Well, it's a question. I'm asking a question. I'm not formulating an opinion here, good. But this gets brought up a lot.
Well, yeah, it gets brought up a lot because there's a bunch of fucking... Okay, listen, let's backtrack here.
Is Gandalf a stoner? Because Gandalf, I guess you could ask the same questions about, because they're always got the pipes.
No.
And there is talk in Tolkien of the types of pipe weed they used. Are they stoners?
But literally...
Are Merry and Pippin, Cheech and Chong?
Tolkien literally describes pipeweed as tobacco leaf. Tabaciana, as he calls it. He describes it in the appendices, and even maybe in the beginning of The Hobbit or The Fellowship or something. So it's literally tobacco, but in the 60s and 70s, a bunch of like hippie stoners got a hold of the Lord of the Rings, and they just fucking loved it. And when they read pipeweed, they were like, "Oh, fucking weed, dude!" And they started having like Lord of the Rings themed weddings, and Tolkien hated it. He wanted to fucking kill himself when he heard about it.
Well, yeah, Tolkien wouldn't have been into the hippie
No, he was
stuff,
an old,
I know,
white, conservative Christian man at Oxford.
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings, as has been the case with other things, took on a kind of a new audience with the hippies, because Lord of the Rings comes out in the 50s, not super successful.
Yeah.
And then it was actually, I know it was a #1 bestseller 20 years after it was published, which I know was also duplicated by Frank Herbert's Dune, because that also took a while to find its audience. I'm sure maybe some other books have done that. Maybe some books that have been adapted to movies 20 years later or something, Yeah, so it took a while to find its audience. So, it was not really, it wasn't necessarily a countercultural thing, but at first it was a niche thing, so you could understand why a countercultural movement would really gravitate towards it, I guess. Yes. If you were to only watch the movies, never read the books, you'd be like, oh, Frodo and Sam, they're best friends. Mm-hmm. In the book, Frodo's best friend is Merry. That's made pretty clear. Sam, not that he's not a good friend, but Sam is kind of a slave, like we were just saying. Yeah, and Merry's really the best friend.
He's manservant. You also have to think about it like World War I, right? Like you have men in the trenches who are wealthy men, or like, again, members of the landed gentry, and you have like their manservants who went to war with them, or they had manservants who they were just got during war. So you had people like sharpening people's razors for shaving and stuff like that. Like Sam is that kind of manservant.
You know who's bad in this movie? I'll say it. Hugo Weaving is bad in this movie. He's bad. He doesn't have a lot to do. I understand that. But he's not good. He's weird. He pronounces Mordor differently than everyone else, and I don't understand why that is. It's like Mordor. Like there's like 8 R's in the way he pronounces it. Yeah.
Well, because he's also a lot older than anybody else.
Well, sure.
And
that's how Mordor was pronounced 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, I think
he just hasn't moved on. He's still calling it Bombay.
Yeah.
Or Peking, It's just,
he's like, next, after we take Mordor, let's move to Rangoon.
Watching these movies when I was younger, one of my many takeaways, was that Elijah Wood has like the biggest eyes in the world. He's got Marty Feldman eyes. He's just got like huge eyes.
Yeah, big.
And he does, but I think you see people's eyes so much in these movies because there's so many close-ups because of the mixing of different sized people. Like if you do a close-up on Gimli, we can just like pretend that Legolas is right next to him. You don't have to see the two next to each other. I think there's a lot of close-ups in this kind of out of necessity. And I think it works, because you have good actors with expressive eyes. That's one of the things that I think makes the Sergio Leone movies work so well, is that you get Eastwood, Eli Wallach, and Lee Van Cleef. They can all tell so much through their eyes. If you get worse actors, those intense close-ups don't work as well.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, to be honest.
Yeah, that's something that I had never noticed until recently. There are a lot of close-ups in this movie, and I think it's mostly out of necessity. I think it's listen, we'll do this effect with the different sets, with the mixing little people and children in, and getting people on stilts. We'll do all this, but we will not do it more than we absolutely need to. We will do enough to make it convincing, but cameraman, just get closer to people if you need to, so if we can hide some stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to say this movie is, for what it is basically perfectly paced. All of the scenes where there's like not action or adventure, it feels like they're accomplishing something. There's like just enough exposition for like what you need to know, and it moves along. I don't want to say quickly, but I feel like every scene has a purpose, and that's what The Two Towers lacks. And maybe The Return of the King does a little bit too. I'm not sure, but Two Towers definitely. Have you ever seen the extended editions of The Hobbits, by the way?
No. Those are movies...
Neither have I, because I can't imagine wanting to watch more of those movies. Not that I dislike the movies, but like...
But no, I agree, though.
Those movies are way longer than they need to be. I don't want to see more of them. Because the Lord of the Rings movies are long. They don't feel like they're necessarily longer than they need to be. And it's like, okay, if you're giving me more of it, I'm going to watch it. If you're giving me more of The Hobbit, I'm like, no, can we watch the shorter version? Can we watch a YouTube compilation of The Hobbit?
Yeah. Can we watch The Hobbit, but only when Gandalf is in it, and then
Can we watch it in Vine form, 7-second videos?
Yeah.
The extended edition of Fellowship is better at bridging this into a bigger story, which like this isn't making good sense. And I'll bring this all home. Give me a second here, but
okay.
So, The Lord of the Rings, the three movies, it's all the same story. We can agree. It's one story. Mm-hmm. But within that one story, there's different things. For instance, you have what's going on in Gondor and the men fighting against the orcs, and the extended editions hint at that a lot earlier. Whereas, like when you're watching the theatrical versions, it kind of shows up at the end of The Two Towers when Faramir takes Frodo and Sam to the kind of the ruins of Osgiliath, but really it's not fully developed until Return of the King, and then it kind of seems like it's coming out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, I thought we were just worrying about this ring. There's also been this other war going on, and even though the two things are related, it still feels a little bit like, oh, we're just kind of coming up with this now. The extended editions sprinkle in little lines of dialogue and stuff that make it clear that there's bigger stuff going on outside of these 9 characters. And I think in that sense, that's one of the ways the extended edition, I don't want to say is superior, but that's one of the things that it kind of does a better job of.
But no, so I do agree with you, and I do agree that the extended just kind of sets up the world a little better and lets you know that things are happening. But
just it's also a little bit, yeah. Is it worth the extra 2.5 hours or however much longer they are? Probably not, but there's some nice touches there.
No, exactly. But I will say, something that you brought up that I kind of want to touch on is that you said that the Fellowship is kind of from the perspective of the hobbits, sort of, or they're introduced to the world through the hobbits.
It is, right?
Well, first off, when you're talking about Sam, he wanted to see the elves. That was a dream of his. But when he gets to Rivendell and says, I'm ready to go home, he says that because they were just supposed to take the ring to Rivendell, leave it, and then go home.
That's true, yes.
Right?
I mean, none of them signed up for this giant adventure, obviously. Well, I mean, they literally did eventually, but I don't know if they signed a contract to be part of the fellowship.
Yeah.
If they had Elrond's lawyers wrote up something, it's like, shit, I only made one copy of this. We need some more. We need some...
Can we get some elven magic?
Someone skin another sheep so we can write some more of these things.
We're introduced to this world through the hobbits in this movie, but I like how at the Two Towers, at the end of this movie, everybody splits up. But in the Two Towers, we are forced to then look at the world through the perspective of Aragorn. And we have to take more of an interest into like what they're doing and not the hobbits. And it really does give you that sense that everybody has split up, you know? So like, now you're following Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Gandalf and what they're doing. And the hobbits have to go do their own thing now, you know?
That is all true. And I guess what kind of bothers me about that to a certain extent, I mean, there's a bunch of great stuff there, obviously. But... it's all supplemental. Like, if the ring stuff fails, like, none of the rest matters. You know? The ring is what's important.
Yeah, but then you can tie it into saying, like, they're doing their part to help Frodo and Sam succeed.
Yeah, it's like Starship Troopers.